This is a big issue. They say, how can you cure something if you can't identify the problem? And people seem to be identifying the anti-Israelism that pervasively through the progressive movement as purely political and not religiously based in any way. Now, anti-Semitism through the ages has been religiously based. What about the roots of religious anti-Semitism today?
Well, the bottom line is when it comes to anti-Semitism in Europe, we're willing to acknowledge the Christian origins of some of this. When it comes to Arab-Muslim anti-Semitism, you can't say the M-word, you can't say the I-word, you can't discuss the fact that this is not something that began in 1967 or 1948, but it goes back over 1,000 years. I mean, you have these rallies where they're shouting, Iftach Iftach al Yahud, they're shouting, they're referencing Muhammad's original genocide of Jews in Arabia. To them, they are if you look at the memory videos, they're very clear about the fact that this is a theological thing. Hamas charter, everything else is clearly, for that matter, the PA's own programming makes it clear that this is theologically based. Yet we're the ones who refuse to acknowledge that and think that we're scoring some sort of points by living in denial.
Living in denial.
Yes.
And that ain't just a river in Egypt. I think I see it a little bit differently. I think religious anti-Semitism is a deep part of the conflict in the region and with the Jewish people. And I think for me, I don't see Islam itself as a problem. I see the Muslim Brotherhood and political Islam as a problem. And that's a very strong distinction by referring to an entire religion in 1,500 years of practice. I'm speaking about 100 years of the Muslim Brotherhood, which started in Egypt, which fused European anti-Semitism and brought anti-Semitism to the Middle East for the first time. There was definitely discrimination against Jews and even pogrom against Jews in the Islamic world, and Jews were treated as second-class citizens very often, or protected, not even citizens but subjects. But anti-Semitism was brought to the Middle East by the Muslim Brotherhood 100 years ago, where they fused the protocols of the Elders of Zion and even Nazi ideology with a very narrow form of reactionary Islam. And that gave birth to political Islam, the Muslim Brotherhood, even Wahhabism is connected to it. The Iranian, Shiite revolutionary regime pays its homage to the Qutubs and the Banais, the intellectual fathers of the Muslim Brotherhood, even the Shiite world. So the Iranian regime, Hamas, Hezbollah, all of them find their roots in political Islam. And I think that is where the religious, reactionary, Nazi-inspired anti-Semitism finds its roots in the Middle East and is very much a part of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And then you have characters like Edward Said, which takes Christian anti-Semitism and I think even replacement theology, right? And there was a form of Christian anti-Semitism which argued to replace the Jews and Judaism with the New Covenant. And I think what Said does is say that the Palestinians have the New Covenant and replace the Jews in the region. So both the Muslim Brotherhood and sort of a Christian anti-Semitism replaces or usurps the Jewish connection to our homeland. And this is where the theological aspects infect the conflict in the region and informs religious anti-Semitism and also the radical left and the radical right in the Western world.
Do you have an idea in mind?
Well, I certainly respect that point of view, and obviously the Nazi influence on the Muslim Brotherhood is well known. The impacts of political Islam are well known. At the same time, Islamism is an attempt to revive Islamic supremacy. It's an attempt to revive the golden age of Islamic rule, and every organization, whether it's the Muslim Brotherhood or ISIS, have that common denominator. They are trying to revive Islam as it should be, Islam as it was, Islamic rule, Islamic supremacy over conquered peoples, which very much include the Jews. And really, if you go back to the origins of things like Allah Akbar, the origins of Islamic conquest of non-Muslims, the Jews are the great failure. The inability to properly conquer the Jews, to convert the Jews, has been at this root of Islamic animosity. Everything that the Islamists are doing, yes, their organization, their tactics were adopted from Nazi Germany, but at the same time, everything theologically comes from Islam. It's not some sort of imaginary new invention. It is indeed exactly what everyone from Muhammad down was saying. saying all along the Jews are the original enemies, the Jews are the quintessential foes of Islam, and that there cannot be peace in the world until the Jews and obviously everyone else who is non-Muslim is subjugated under Islamic law. And this is ultimately what we're dealing with. Yes, political Islam is a somewhat modern development, but it's only a modern development because there was this discrepancy between the original caliphate and the various regimes that sprang up, the modern attempts, the Young Turks, the attempts to create a new modern Arab, Turkish, or other identities. Their attempt is just to roll back the clock. They're modern only in the sense that they're trying to eliminate modernity. They're trying to get back to Islam as it was.
Your thoughts?
So I agree with much of what Daniel said and respect what he said. And there's truth in what he's articulating, and it's a very important phenomenon, even processes that we need to understand contemporary anti-Semitism and the conflict in the region. That having been said, we also have to recognize that there are other strains or strands of Islam which is capable of respecting and appreciating and recognizing the other. And I believe with the Abrahamic Accords and other kind of open elements of the Islamic community throughout the world needs to be embraced and understood that there is within Islam sectors that can respect and understand and appreciate the Jews and our connection to our homeland in Israel.
But can they do it openly, or will they be shouted down by the more conservative branches of Muslim society?
Of course, people are risking their lives to make a rapprochement with the Jewish people and with Israel, but they're doing it, and I think we need to recognize it. It is happening.
What do you think? To what extent, Daniel?
Well, I think the Abraham Accords are certainly an exciting development, but there are two things to consider. First of all, the Abraham Accords, interestingly enough, are largely focused on countries that really did not have an indigenous Jewish population, whereas countries that did, like Egypt and Iraq, remain quite violently anti-Semitic, or for that matter, Iran. The second thing to remember is that within Islamic culture, there's certainly plenty of precedent for forming temporary alliances. There's a temporary alliance with the United States, for example. The Saudis formed an alliance with us, even at the same time as they incited terrorism against us. There is, again, a large history dealing with that. There's a hudna, there's a temporary truce, which is what the Abraham Accords are. At the moment, there's a lot of love bombing, there's a lot of friendliness. I hope that continues. I certainly don't want extended conflict. I just think we have to be realistic about the fact that within Islam, this is a temporary truce. It is a temporary phenomenon in response to a larger threat, which is twofold. One is the rise of Iran, and the second is the American abandonment of traditional allies in the Middle East, beginning with Obama. This is very much a response to that. I am afraid that it is a temporary phenomenon, that anti-Semitism has not actually gone away, and I'm afraid it will resurface.
Well, what is this administration, the Democrat administration, doing now to further the Abraham Accords and Arab support for Israel?
Well, this administration is hostile to the Abraham Accords. It is obviously supportive of Iran. It is obviously supportive of Qatar. This is just a basic reality here. They're not going to officially come out against the Abraham Accords, but they're wary about using the name, especially because it's associated with the previous administration. And they're also uncomfortable with this idea that you can resolve the Arab-Israeli conflict without going to the Palestinians, because on the left, this was the central thesis. You could not possibly resolve the conflict without going through the Palestinians. The Abraham Accords completely overturned that wisdom, which is why they are out to destroy the Abraham Accords.
Charles, just one more question. Today is Nakba Day, and across the world, in major cities across the world, certainly across the United States and in major cities in Western Europe. So there's an issue because these Nakba protests are being taken on their face as legitimate, and that Israel was a colonialist who usurped lands that belonged to the Palestinian Muslims. What about the Jewish establishment's role in trying to establish the contrary fact of Jewish history, and where are we today in that struggle?
So I think, well, first to respond to Daniel, I agree with a lot of what you said, but at the same time, Morocco is part of the peace agreements, and there was a long established Jewish community there, which I think is being embraced again in Moroccan society as well. And, the thing in terms of Nakba, I would also say that it's very important for the Jewish establishment to acknowledge the history of Mizrahi Jews in the region. We often forget that the largest Jewish Israeli group in Israeli society today are people from the region, are Mizrahi Jews, and there's a whole, wonderful history and rich, wisdom and culture that we as the Jewish people need to embrace for so many reasons.
One more comment regarding Nakba Day and the acceptance of the illegitimacy of Israel as a usurper.
Well, it's vital for the Jewish community, for Jews, for Jewish leadership to assert that Jews are the indigenous population, that we're not just returning, that we're always there. And yes, Charles made a very important point. The majority of Jews are indeed Jewish refugees from the Muslim world. They're not Europeans. They're not New Yorkers, as the left and the anti-Israel crowd tries to depict them as. Jews are there in our own homeland. We are living in our own homeland. And in fact, the other part of this is that the Arab Muslims are the ones who are the invaders, who are the occupiers. They came there as the process of conquest. They came there to colonize, and that is why they are there. Now, Israelis have not kicked them out, but at the same time, it is important to recognize that their rights, that their presence there is not nearly as legitimate as our own. And when they insist that they are the indigenous people, it is important to say they are the colonists, we are the indigenous people.
I think just to add to what Daniel said, we have to remember that the Dome of the Rock on the Alaska Mosque is built on top of the temple. It's not under the temple. We are at the foundation. Archaeologically, we are indigenous. And Jerusalem is the indivisible capital of the Jewish people. That's number one. Number two, I think also to what Daniel was saying, the anti-Semitism in the United States, when it comes to so-called progressive issues, is so disgusting and repugnant. 2 generations ago, Jews were exterminated by the millions because we were not white. We were poisoning the purity of the white Aryan race with the Semitic people. And today, people on the left, the Squad, the Linda Sarsours, and the Students for Justice in Palestine, with their left-wing Anglo-Saxon American supporters, are so repugnant. They're now claiming Jews are white, and it's not Jews are white, sorry for the extermination of what happened, sorry for the racism in our civilization, in our universities, in our thought process, in our philosophy, in our theology, and welcome to the club. No. Now they're saying that we've gone from Semitic, poisoners of the purity of the white Aryan race to people that are not only white, but the quintessential white supremacist, apartheid-supporting racist. In 2 generations, the disingenuine hatred, the irrationality needs to be called out by our leaders, and we should not take this at all, and we should stand up as progressive Jews, as liberal Jews, as conservative Jews, against this form of disgusting, blatant anti-Semitism.
But isn't this being taught now as part of critical race theory?
It very much is. I completely agree with everything you said. I could not have said it better than myself. This is the attempt to model the old Soviet coalition onto American domestic politics, which, of course, reduces the so-called Third World Alliance, regardless of whether these people are considered white or not, because Arabs, for most of American history, were considered white, actually. Until recently, they began trying to create a new identity for themselves. So these are people who now decided that they don't want to be white when they can benefit from that, and that they want to denounce Jews who, again, remain the victims of the majority of anti-Semitic hate crimes as white, when it suits them.
Daniel, thank you very much. Charles, thank you very much, both of you guys.
My pleasure.
I'm taking it. Oh,